Welcome to the Midgard Archives. In the frozen silence of the Viking Age, death was rarely a quiet affair. We've been conditioned by modern games and movies to see the Draugr as mindless, skeletal warriors, little more than level 1 enemies in a digital landscape. But to the people of ancient Scandinavia, the Draugr were a terrifying physical reality. They weren't ghosts, they weren't spirits, they were afturgöngur, again walkers. Tonight, we open the Midgard Archives to uncover the grisly truth of the Norse undead and the desperate rituals the Vikings used to keep their neighbors in the ground. Imagine a body, blue-black with decay, but possessing a strength that could crush a man's ribcage with a single hand. The Sagas describe the Draugr as Haugbúi, death blue. They were heavy, immensely heavy, and they possessed a terrifying, malevolent intelligence. Unlike the zombies of modern cinema, the Draugr remembered. They remembered their enemies, they remembered their homes, and they were fueled by an insatiable envy for the living. They could swell to the size of an ox at will, or slip through the smallest cracks in a wooden wall. They didn't just haunt a location, they invaded it. The Vikings were a practical people. If they suspected a deceased relative might return, they didn't just pray, they took action. First, there was the corpse door. They would never carry a body out through the main entrance of a house. Instead, they would cut a hole in a back wall, drag the body through, and immediately seal the stones or wood behind it. The logic was simple. The dead can only return the way they left. If the door no longer exists, the Draugr is lost. But they didn't stop there. Archaeologists have found graves across Sweden and Norway where the deceased was buried with iron needles driven through the soles of their feet, pinning them to the earth. They would tie the big toes together, or place a pair of open iron scissors on the chest. To the Vikings, iron was the only thing that could bite back against the supernatural. But to truly understand why the Vikings lived in such fear, we must look beyond the wandering Draugr to the ones who stayed behind, the Haugbúi. Unlike the Draugr, who hunts the living, the Haugbúi is the eternal guardian of the burial mound. Imagine a silent, blue-black figure sitting on a throne of gold and rusted swords, deep beneath the earth. They are the Mound-Dwellers. They do not seek to harm their neighbors unless someone enters the mound. Old Swedish legends speak of the Högeld, the mound fire, a strange, cold, flickering blue light that would dance over the graves of powerful chieftains on the darkest nights of winter. This was the signal that the Haugbúi was awake, that he was watching. If we look at the soil of Scandinavia, the folklore takes on a chilling physical form. Archaeologists have uncovered deviant burials that suggest the fear of the again-walker was universal. In some graves, large, heavy boulders were placed specifically on the chest and neck of the deceased, not to honor them, but to weigh them down. In others, iron knives were found placed at the groin or throat. We see evidence of repeated burial, where a grave was opened months after death, just to decapitate the body and place the head between the legs. These were the desperate acts of people who believed, with absolute certainty, that the dead could rise. It wasn't just a story told in the longhouse, it was a crisis managed with iron and stone. The most chilling account comes from the Saga. It tells the story of Glámr, a massive antisocial shepherd who was killed on Christmas Eve. He didn't stay dead for long. He returned as a blue-skinned monstrosity, riding the roofs of the village houses until the timbers cracked under his weight. He didn't just kill the livestock, he drove the villagers to madness simply by staring into their eyes. When the hero Grettir finally wrestled the monster to the ground, The Draugr didn't just die. He laid a curse on Grettir, a curse of eternal loneliness and fear of the dark. This was the true power of the Draugr. They didn't just take your life, they took your peace. Then, there is the tragedy of Thórólfr Lamefoot from the Eyrbyggja Saga. Thórólfr was a man of immense malice who died sitting in his high seat. After his death, his presence was so heavy and so evil that his own son had to break down the wall of the house to remove him. Wherever Thórólfr's body was moved, the land withered. Birds that flew over his burial mound fell dead from the sky. Cattle that grazed near his grave went mad. Even in death, his envy of the living was so potent that it poisoned the earth itself. The Vikings knew that some spirits are too heavy for the hall of Valhalla, and too angry for the fields of hell. They remain here, in the cold, waiting. The Draugr were the embodiment of the Vikings' greatest fear, that the past wouldn't stay buried. They were the physical reminder that even in death, the North is cold, and it is unforgiving. Thank you for visiting the Midgard Archives. If you have an appetite for the unheard history of the North, subscribe and join us. In our next entry, we venture deep into the Swedish forests to find the woman with the hollow back, the Huldra. Until then, stay in the light.